the list of everyone who hasn't paid their ground rent.
So you can imagine
the
that
papers today. So a lot is going on.
Some are owing as little as 9,000 naira plus, and some are owing as much as millions of naira in the FCT, and the FCT is saying, pay up your ground rent. Hello. See what we're saying about just follow the constitution or laws as it is. But there's someone here who would help us understand all this, follow the laws or obey the laws or not obey them. And he is a policy analyst. Please join me to welcome Dr. Emeka Okegu. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Good morning, Kela.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nato.
It's good to have you.
Good morning, Adjourned.
How have you been?
I'm good. I'm keeping well.
Because I saw you when you were coming in, you were actually smiling. So it looks like the pressure amount on the naira falls to 1,700 naira to $1 is not exactly eating you that much, or facility deficit threatens new school curriculum, or Greek collapse. Why the FG should invest more in power sector is not really affecting you.
Okay, in one word, it's what's called the herd immunity. In another word, is what's called, what you call your socio-economic realities. You might add political, you might add legal, it are just realities. And in dealing with these realities, you don't just deal with the realities as they are in themselves. You try to make some sense out of it.
Yeah.
And in trying to make the sense out of it, the first question will be, is this alien? Is this about us? Is this global? I mean, this is where you now begin to want to do some thinking, probably, thinking it through, as they would say. It's not a dead nail. That's what's important. We are not in the throes of death either. Okay, it's all about now how you envisage that a liter of fuel is, 1,300, and you need to get full tank. The question will be, do you need to get full tank? If you have some other contending needs, okay? You don't need to get full tank to travel from Maitama to probably wherever it is you're going to.
The other side is, do you really do you need to even travel?
Okay, no, well, and then you talked about ground rents and all that. And like you said, is that a social need? Is that social responsibility to pay ground rent? Are they just fostering it on us, or has it been something that's been there all the while that people have willfully, deliberately neglected or have been very ignorant about? So you see, when you talk about citizens' rights and citizens' response, this is also where that handshake comes. The question will be, if we are enjoying infrastructure, have we ever enjoyed infrastructure? Would it be fair to say this infrastructure has been free? Would it also be right to say that government should be able to at least, do some social interventions in some areas? Now, this is what you need to uncouple. So whereas government is right to ask for ground rent, would it be expedient and proper, to ask for those ground rents at this point in time and then give the time, you're giving for it to be paid and people lose their properties? Okay, Neto, you mentioned 9,000. You might think it's small money. But you might be surprised that to some people, after this calculation of rent, food, electricity, whatever, that 9,000 becomes king. So you might be earning 300,000 and might not even have 9,000 to pay out immediately. Okay, so it's a difficult situation, no doubt about it. But what I tell people is what you saw me do: smile through it. Okay, no matter what it is, okay, do not see it as an end.
But let's slow up a little bit here and pull back a bit.
Yes.
You've talked about all the things that are staring the citizenry and indeed the government in the face.
Yes.
And you've talked about how your own, how do you call it, protection mechanism.
Yes.
Smile through it.
Yes.
But in the course of that, you mentioned citizens' rights, citizens' responsibility.
Yes.
So swing it the other way, government's right and government's responsibility.
Yes.
So put the two on the two sides.
Yes.
It appears the weight right now is heavy, mark the word appears, is heavy on the citizens. And it looks like it's lighter on the government.
Now this is where you now have that point of rights and entitlement. Okay, this is where you now have that point where we now need to begin to now think about these new realities that are on the ground. That we are not going to be getting as much free lunches or packs as we used to get in the past. Okay? Because hitherto, all you needed to do was pack into a house. It didn't matter. Once you paid your rent, you didn't even remember that there was ground rent. You didn't even remember there were environmental fees. You didn't even remember there were fumigation fees until, you either get a court summons or somebody comes to your gate to start making this demand. Because these things are not explicit, okay, when you're entering into some rental arrangement or when you are, getting rights to be able to own or build a house. These are things that are not common. You don't see them in papers, except you see the people come around. And sometimes, and I've experienced it, somebody walks into your office with a bill and you're looking at millions. And the next thing is, how did I accumulate this? And it turns out that the last person who used the office or who used the house, okay, especially with NEPA in those days before, the prepaid meters came. In fact, even with the prepaid meters, they will put somebody on some, I don't know how they make that arrangement. And then when the person leaves and a new tenant comes in, they now say to you, you need to clear the backlog, okay, that was on that property before, you're given a meter or whatever. Now, these are where you're talking about these government responsibilities, and this is where I think government needs to clean up its act. Okay, it's one thing, yes, I think this announcement, came 2 weeks or some, and then it says if you don't pay, you're going to be doing ABC. Of course, everybody's going to be running, to the courts, and we're going to be having some pushback. And in trying to get these courts now intervene, you're also not getting that citizens buy-in. Because like my father says, you might get justice in a court, but you never get peace. So sometimes this citizen intervention, community engagement with government and citizenry might do a lot than us coming to say, oh, I'm giving you this deadline, when you know that people don't have this money. When you know a lot of people can afford it, especially those that now are jumping into the million, billion, range. Some could have just bought that property with their retirement benefit, and then you didn't bother to go, to get that ground rent for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden you're landing a bill of 100 million or 10 million or even a naira on somebody, who just moved in. So this is now to bring that component of government. And this is where the issues of data statistics, come into play, right? When you are, like I told the guys that came, I said, listen, everybody has an email. Why would I wait for you for 3 years to walk into my office to come and deliver a bill? Why wouldn't you send it to my mail address? Everybody has a phone that can, take some of these services. Why wouldn't you, first and foremost, you have everybody's number, at least NIMC is supposed to have it. Okay? If you have a BVN, you should be able to have our data. Now, the moment you tie me to this property like you've done, why wouldn't you send, this bill to the email address on, this registration document you have? So part of the request is also where government, I think, might need to up its game. But are you going to be paying what you're owing? Definitely yes.
I mean, the thing is, listening to you talk about that, it's very important also that citizens follow through on processes. Because you're trying to own a house. You have to find out exactly what's going on. What's everything here? Go to the appropriate offices, find out what I'm supposed to pay, what am I supposed to owe, what am I supposed to do. It's many people, and I say this with no fear. Many people do not care about process in Nigeria.
I agree.
For many Nigerians, you do anywhere belle face. You do what you can. Keep moving. I remember one time trying to guess. Let's check the tires of this car. Check the expiry date on the tires. All the tires were expired. Okay, so we need to change. He said, no, let's ride it until all of it falls off. And it's a behavior that many Nigerians, we ride it until the wheels fall off, and then we try to see what we can do at that point. But back to that conversation about the government and its people and this social contract that we have with government. We saw recently, of course, this cabinet reshuffle, and we've been talking so many conversations around who was brought in. Was this the right choice? Wasn't this supposed to reduce the cost of governance? Well, you're hiring more people. How are you reducing cost if you're hiring more people? With everything that's going on, we have to now start looking at setting the agenda for these offices. So let's talk a bit about that. Okay. With the reshuffling, what should these new ministers, the ones who are going to be brand new, let's start with that. What should they be having at the back of their minds? And for the ones who were moved from one place to the other, what should they be thinking about in their new offices?
Okay, in setting the agenda, we need to look at what you call a functional administrative process. Okay, this is where you get your standard operating practices or procedures, if you may. The first will be that for you to do anything, a PPA, plan program of action, any planning, you will need statistics. Okay, there are two ways you can generate statistics. You either generate it real time, okay, from primary sources, or you generate it from scoping studies and all that. So the first you need to do is to say, against what statistics are we, putting this plan into focus? And the first will be, who has this responsibility of generating these statistics? So in this stage now, it will be the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, because under them you have the MBS. And then in bringing the MBS into focus, you also need to, what's the carrying capacity of MBS to now generate these reliable, cogent, primary source statistics that will be aiding us in our planning? The story of another day, it could take 10 hours. For me, I have, my doubts about that carrying capacity, all right? Now, the second will be that when you now set this framework, okay, it now ties into now deliverables. So the deliverables are no longer political. They are now mathematical and statistical. They are now timelined and are now focused. They are now output-based and are now result-oriented. At that level, you will now begin to now look at those critical ministries that you need to support with these statistics. For me, ministries like the new commissions, the new
Ministry of Regional
Development will come into play, because they will be needing, for me, that's the biggest and greatest of the operational ministries. But at the back end, I would say it will be, for me, the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, supported by the Ministry of Science and Technology. If you don't have this tripod, okay, because now when you have statistics and they are cogent, and we are saying in Abuja, X amount of people live here, okay, X amount of houses are here, it's easy for you to plan your transportation, it's easy for you to plan your energy, it's easy for you to even plan your water reticulation programs. But when you're plucking it, off the air, and with what happens in our budgeting system, where you now have what they call subheads and envelopes, that begins to make a mess of the whole thing. Now, the next will be this new Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, supported by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. Are you following what I'm saying now? Right. Because at this level, remember that at the level of the regional, commissions, you now have enough data. What can we do there? What are the gaps? What are the issues? Okay, especially regards human capital, especially regards your human resources that you need to be moving, those other places that are going to be helping you get productive forward. So when we set this agenda, it becomes a lot easier for you to now begin to probably mark them or match them or whatever. It's
interesting that you brought up the collaborations that are necessary in this agenda setting. But there was one ministry, there's a new one, the livestock.
Oh, great. That's, for me, again, I'm a proponent of creating that livestock ministry, but I think a lot of people have a wrong impression that is the Ministry of Cattle Rearing. And that's why you see a lot of people pushing back at it. But if we want to, truth be told, because of things that are beyond us as a country, and this is where you now bring in forced migration, this is where you now bring in the issues of climate change. Now, a lot of these cattle or livestock that you see strolling into or coming into Nigeria are on forced migration. They don't have any other choice than to move. So it's either death or you flee. And then when they are coming into this country, our areas, what they are looking for are greens. And to that animal, your vegetable is green, Your
Okay, but
Ugu is
ranch
green.
though, ranch.
Beautiful.
Do it like a business.
Now,
Ranch. Why are you moving animals around?
That's what I'm saying.
Even though I understand that this is it's a very strong conversation, especially for many people who do livestock development in northern Nigeria. But some of the biggest livestock companies that we have don't carry their cows around town. They ranch. Former President Muhammadu Buhari ranches. A lot of people who do this business, if you want to really enjoy the yield from your cattle, you ranch.
Understand it.
In Pakistan, that's one of their biggest businesses is the livestock business. In some parts of that country, everything from cheese to milk to meat to horn in one place. Everybody knows to hone in on what they do, run it like a business. Isn't that? It's because this preferential treatment, so to speak, is going to them who they can, oh, no, we need to help them. Every other person who's running a business is thinking, well, I have a rabbitry. Can I put my rabbitry in the middle of Sokoro on the highway because there's grass there? They eat grass too.
Okay,
you know, so how do we ensure that this livestock ministry does what it is supposed to do?
I think it's important we put a proper, perspective to this. You've mentioned Pakistan. I thought you were also going to be talking about Botswana. Okay. What's happening here, you must take into consideration and the fact that 80% of the cattle you have here are on forced migration. So the first thing you need to do is to be able to create that framework that treats that cattle as refugees, both cattle and their owners. That's the first thing. And in doing so, you must be able to create what we call integrator points. It is at that level of creating your integrator points that I can now begin to now do documentation and classification. And this is after that you can now begin to talk about your ranching. Okay? Now, first and foremost, you have people that are running for life. Now, the first thing you do when you see somebody is to hold the person and say, calm down, all is good. Let's calm down, it's okay now. So what you need to do is to contain those animals at least for a minimum of 60 to 190 days. But that containment would have a lot of demands. The first and the most important demand, and Kela, this is where the problem of livestock business in Nigeria lies, is the availability of forage. Because you will need to feed, and I can tell you this, we have about 24 million cattle, supposedly. You'll be needing 500 million kg of grass to be able to feed them on a weekly basis. If you're going to be feeding them in that ranch, containment. And this is why one of the things you see before you see anybody talk about all the places that you've mentioned now is that you see their bands. And that's why the popular, it's easier to find a needle in a haystack. Haystack is grass that are stacked up for livestock.
Okay, Mr. Okego, there's a couple of things you've mentioned again, and it's the way bringing them all together. You've regional development, and I wrote here regional development versus state government. How would that collaboration work out? Because bringing it to this livestock and the forced migration of the cattle and their owners, one would think wherever they are migrating from, the states around that axis, whether north or south, because they are migrating from all around. So from whichever angle they are migrating from, one would think that those states could say, okay, let us plant grass and create a location where they can come into. And they are fed, they can be paying a token for whatever. That's a source of revenue generation. They plant the cattle, and then someone can say, I want to buy a cow. I want to buy one cow for something, and knows I will go to Enugu, I'll go to Kaduna, I'll go to Gombe, or this is where the market is. One will be thinking that the states can be thinking in that direction. Now, also, this regional government, at what point do we demarcate their role? Clearly stated, I mean regional development rather, at what point do we demarcate what the regional development agencies under the regional development ministry are going to be doing as against what the states are going to be doing?
There's no need for the demarcation.
Okay.
There's no need for it. What you just need to do is to create a collaboration. And in creating this collaboration is for you to now allocate responsibilities. First and foremost, remember that the federal government does not own as much land as the state does. Okay? Remember that you've talked about planting this forage. All right? And if land is in the hands of a local government or the state government, there is nothing that stops the regional commissions from first and foremost identifying one, land, and allocating lands for forage, and then do it in collaboration with the federal government using NAUDA to now do the land crawling, and using the Ministry of Agriculture, okay, and then their supporting institutions to now start planting this species of forage. If you come to my center in Abuja here, I have about 6 or 7 of them I've planted, and a lot of those seeds, surprisingly, I got from Ghana. Ghana has done a lot of it. So what it is we're trying to do is to showcase that, I mean, this is not rocket science. Three of us here somehow are linked to, in fact, yours is even worse. You know, if your father-in-law is not dead, it's better start saving money for a cow. The day the man drops dead, Neto, you are dragging one cow into your in-laws. Okay? So it's become culture. It's become spiritual to us. I mean, I had this and the guy never forgave me. There's this time they were doing some mass burial of some people that Fulani or headsmen had, whoever had slaughtered, and then he sent me the video where they were feeding them. And I said, is that meat that is in that food? I hope it's not cow meat. For the next 5 minutes, there was nothing on earth he didn't tell me. But the message was clear, I mean. So this has become traditional. Kela, you're a woman. And no matter how close anybody is to your husband, if you don't have meat in your soup, no matter how close they are, you won't bring out that soup. You here, I mean, please say I'm talking nonsense. Just meat.
You know what? So, permit me to drag this conversation to Ayo, who has been. He has some questions that we wanted to ask. Ayo, over to you.
Well, thank you, Nyota. One of the things that readily comes to my mind to ask, still in the same space of the conversation that we're having, is what do you think is, I mean, you said something that I have repeated countless times on this program, and the federal government doesn't have so much land. The states have all the land. So when the federal government, for instance, pronounces that we're going to take X number of people out of poverty, we're going to do this in agriculture, we'll do that in agriculture, we have X 500,000 or so hectares of land, you know, for agriculture in the various states. It sounds to me like a call for collaboration. So I'm wondering, from your perspective and in your opinion, is that collaboration happening? If it is happening, how come we don't see it? If it is not happening, why not?
It's not happening because you don't have that resource base, okay, that can be able to give impetus to your plans. First and foremost, if you're talking about 500,000 hectares of land, you need to show clearly where they are. Now, showing clearly where they are, yes, everybody says to you, we'll have 82 million hectares of land. Where are they? And then how ready are they for them to be able to do what it is you want to do? That's one. And this is why in my beginning I talked about, you know, statistics as being very basic. So you are no longer making political statements or wish lists. You are now, you know, making policy pronouncements that are backed by clear programs and actions. That's the difference. Okay, and for you to be able to create that collaboration, the first thing you need to do is to be able to now identify, you know, the issues, the activities, the players, and of course the funding. And yes, and how you're going to be getting either your ROI or your ROE, whichever comes, you know, first, so that you can now make it a business, no longer some social program. And the moment you make it a business, this is now where your private sector begins to come in. So it's all about your data and statistics. That's very critical, and it's just not for you to go and plug this data out by, you know, doing scoping studies or doing some imaginary elucidation. You need it needs to be fact-based. Okay, it needs to be primary, so that when you're saying that you want to establish farms in 500,000 hectares of land? Who has done the soil testing? Where is the water going to be coming from? You know, what seeds are you going to be planting there? Are they DNA logged? Do you have people who are, you know, now multiplying these seeds for you? And ABCD. So that is why I'm saying that the first and most important ministry in trying to now do this agenda setting will be economic planning and budget.
You know, it's really disturbing and sad, if you ask me, because the president, while making a statement or two at the two-day consultative workshop on livestock reforms in Abuja recently, he said Nigeria spends approximately $1.5 billion each year on importing milk and dairy products. I think it was the Governor Ambode administration in Lagos that told us that Nigerians spend about 60 billion naira or thereabout daily on food. And we have been told countless times the thousands of cows that are slaughtered daily in Nigeria. So the point here is the market is there. We have everything it takes. I'm looking at a PwC document now as at 2020. As at year 2020, that says we spent about 22.8 trillion naira on food items in 2019. That's more than half of the total household expenditure of 40.2 trillion naira. Also underscoring, of course, the importance of food. Agriculture is set to contribute approximately 22% to the GDP, essentially saying that this is our oil. How come we don't have the sufficient collaboration to put it all together? Maybe not federal and state. How come even the regions, the geopolitical regions themselves can't come together and do something? It's not that it can't be done. Lagos and Kebbi did it. So what really is the problem here? A lack of vision, a lack of will, or infrastructure? What exactly do you think are the issues?
Well, I think it's lack of the understanding of the difference between agriculture and food production. They're not the same thing, really, when you want to drill it down. And if you're talking about food production, that is where technology now has a very major role to play. And this is where you're able to now disrupt what happens in agriculture, which is now the season system. And that's why you say, you hear people say, oh, we are soon going into the season where we can no longer plant yam, where we can no longer plant corn, where we can no longer plant this. Now, that's what happens in agriculture. But in food production, what you do is that you produce all the year round because you are now supported by the right technologies. Okay, you can create the right environments for you to have that your maximum yield. So you don't have a season for pepper, season for this, season for that. I think that's one of the greatest challenges. But I'm also happy to announce that I see some efforts being made by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, to disrupt it by what they call their homestead agriculture program, where, like you have elsewhere, I think UK has started doing it, what they call urban agriculture and rooftop farming. So what we need to do is in defining food production, you also don't define it in isolation. Okay, I like the word thousands, that you used, but I'd be more comfortable if we were more definite in that statistics to say on a daily basis, we're able to move 10,000 cattle from here to here at the value of this to this, and it goes to A, B, C, D. Now, if you keep moving, if you now start looking at that source, you can now start now, doing your mapping against the source to say, how consistent is this? How are we able to rebuild, the stock that you're slaughtering? Because it takes minimum of about 18 months to start growing cattle to a point where you can, get it to slaughter. But in some climes, because of feeding, and best practices, you can actually get them fattened, move them from maybe 100 kg to 500, 300, depending on what it is you want to achieve in a maximum of 90 days. But what is first and most important is that you need to put identities, okay, to those cattle. You need to know who owns them, where they are coming from, what they are coming here to do. If they're on forced migration, you need to know how long they want to stay to go back. If they're here to stay, then you need to now plan a program of maybe shared prosperity, where the owners Okay, the government, and this is where even the host communities can begin to collaborate. You can create a program that makes it possible for the host community to contribute maybe forage, security, water, and then the people bring in their cattle. Somebody brings in the value systems, meat processing and all that. Some other person, this is how you build these corporations, that people actually academically call value chains. You cannot bring everybody together and then you have an economy that is functional.
Well, you say you like the word thousands and you like something a little more definite. Information available says we consume about, in Lagos alone, we consume between 8,000 and 10,000 cattle. And in Nigeria, about 90,000 cows daily. That's according to former Minister of Agriculture, Alduogbe. And Lagos alone spends about 3 billion naira on food value chain in a day. 3 billion naira, that's quite a lot of money. So I'm wondering, so if we know all of these, forgive me, sir, I'm going to stay on this issue of collaboration. Now, there is the Ministry of Agriculture and there is Ministry of Livestock Production. There is the Ministry of Water Resources. There is the Ministry of Trade and Industry. I understand. I mean, you must be aware of the special agro-industrial processing zones. Well, $538 million initial sum for 7 states plus the FCT that was guaranteed by the federal government. So all of these collaborations have to happen. Otherwise, no plan, just as you said, is going to fructify. So what are the critical things that need to play out one step after the other as we make progress?
I'll stay with the statistics. This again are assumptions or postulations, if you may. Because if you're killing 90,000 cattle every day, you won't have any left out of the 224 million that we claim we have. And those statistics have remained very static. And if you just look at what I told you, remember or recall what I said a little earlier, it takes you 2 to 3 years to be able to regrow or get cattle to that point where you can take it to slaughter. And we don't have agro practices that ensure this multiplication. Okay, so cattle, livestock is dwindling. What you have more are those who are forced migration. But instead, with your collaboration, cattle is an economy you can value. You're just looking at the meat. You have not even looked at the blood. You're not even looked at the skin. You're not even looked at the horns. In fact, I'd gone to a place in Germany where, they use cow horns to do what they call CLC, cellular lightweight concrete, that takes houses to 4 floors without iron. I didn't say I read it. I was there in the factory. Okay, so now there are so much you can be able to do, but what I think we're missing here, and this is the point I'm trying to make, is that we need to do our back-end planning. The moment you don't have that back-end planning, a lot of talk is cheap. I mean, you can talk about how big, how wide, how much. Now, who are these abattoirs? First and foremost, I'll give you this challenge, and please, maybe you can take on this. Go to that abattoir in Lagos and let them show you where they are containing 9,000 cattle a day.
Okay, sir.
Where they're flooding it. And
We really have to go. We really have to go. It's okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming in this morning. But this conversation, I'm sure we're not done with it. We'll get back to it and we'll still bring you back. Thank you once again.
Pleasure.
Dr. Emeka Okegu is a policy analyst and he joined us month.
You can also add chief to it because of where we're coming for your father-in-law.
All right, Sunrise Daily. We'll be back after the business morning on Sunrise Daily. Just stay with us.